The empty beer bottle spun end over end through the smoky air of Kellerman's bar, aimed directly at the quiet woman in the corner booth. In exactly 23 minutes, that bottle would shatter against the wall behind her head, after she'd effortlessly dodged what should have been a career-ending assault. In exactly 23 minutes, every person in that dive bar would understand they had just witnessed Lieutenant Commander Jade Winters being attacked, and why that single moment of drunken stupidity would destroy 3 military careers before the night was over. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But for now, the Friday evening crowd at Kellerman's bar near Fort Meridian was thick with off-duty personnel drowning their weekly frustrations in cheap beer and cheaper whiskey. The neon Budweiser sign cast red shadows across scarred wooden tables, while classic rock blared from speakers that had seen better decades. This was their sanctuary, their place to blow off steam away from the rigid hierarchy of military life. Lieutenant Commander Jade Winters sat alone in the far corner booth. Her civilian clothes, faded jeans, and a simple gray sweatshirt, making her nearly invisible among the rowdy crowd. Her dark auburn hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, and wire-rimmed glasses gave her an almost scholarly appearance that seemed completely out of place in the testosterone-fueled atmosphere of Kellerman's. She nursed a single beer while reading what appeared to be a paperback novel, occasionally glancing up to observe the crowd with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail without drawing attention to the surveillance. What none of the intoxicated patrons noticed was how she'd chosen the corner booth for maximum visibility and multiple exit routes, how her posture remained perfectly straight despite her casual appearance, how her right hand never strayed far from her jacket pocket, or how those seemingly gentle eyes had already identified every potential threat, improvised weapon, and tactical advantage in the cramped space. Staff Sergeant Rocco Martinez held court at the bar's center, his muscular 6'3" frame commanding attention from the dozen Marines scattered across nearby tables. His deployment ribbons and combat infantry badge marked him as someone who'd seen action overseas, and his booming voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. 3 beers had amplified his natural swagger into something approaching arrogance as he regaled his audience with stories that grew more impressive with each telling. "So there I was in Kandahar," Rocco announced, gesturing broadly with his 4th beer, surrounded by insurgents with nothing but my sidearm and pure Marine Corps' determination. His audience of junior enlisted personnel hung on every word, their own drinks forgotten as their sergeant painted himself as a single-handed force of military destruction. Corporal Danny Kowalski, barely 21 and still green from boot camp, watched his sergeant with the kind of hero worship that made senior NCOs either proud or uncomfortable. His baby face and obvious eagerness to impress made him the perfect audience for Rocco's increasingly exaggerated war stories. Private First Class Tyler Reeves completed the trio of troublemakers, his slight build and nervous energy making him the type who compensated for physical limitations through loud aggression and misplaced bravado. His multiple tattoos and constant fidgeting suggested someone trying desperately to project toughness he didn't naturally possess. The 3 Marines had been drinking for 2 hours, their conversation growing louder and more aggressive as alcohol dissolved what remained of their off-duty discretion. Kellerman's was their territory, their domain where rank meant less than drinking capacity and storytelling ability. "Check out the librarian in the corner," Tyler sneered, pointing toward Jade's booth with obvious disdain. "What's some college girl doing in our bar? This ain't Starbucks, sweetheart." His comment drew laughs from nearby tables, where other patrons began turning their attention toward the woman who'd been quietly minding her own business. Rocco's gaze followed Tyler's gesture, his alcohol-clouded vision focusing on what he perceived as an easy target for entertainment. "Probably some officer's wife slumming it with the real warriors," he announced loudly enough for half the bar to hear. "Thinks she can hang with Marines because she's read some books about military life." The crowd's attention was shifting toward Jade's booth, creating the kind of pack mentality that turned individual stupidity into group harassment. Phone cameras emerged from pockets as patrons sensed entertainment brewing. The modern reflex to document rather than intervene, making the situation more dangerous for everyone involved. Danny's youth and inexperience made him eager to prove himself worthy of his sergeant's approval. "Maybe we should go over and explain proper bar etiquette to the civilian," he suggested with the kind of misguided enthusiasm that had gotten countless young Marines into trouble throughout history. Jade continued reading her book, but those observant eyes had noted the escalating attention and the trio's movement in her direction. Her breathing remained controlled, her posture unchanged, but anyone trained in threat assessment might have noticed how her weight had shifted slightly forward, how her free hand had moved closer to her pocket, or how she'd marked the exact distance between her position and every exit. The jukebox switched to a metallic song that perfectly matched the growing aggression in the air, the heavy guitar riffs providing soundtrack to what was about to become a very expensive mistake for 3 career Marines, who had no idea they were approaching someone whose actual rank exceeded their combined authority by several orders of magnitude. Rocco pushed back from the bar with liquid courage coursing through his veins, his combat boots clicking against the worn linoleum as he led his small squad toward the corner booth where Lieutenant Commander Jade Winters continued to read her book, with the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly how the next 23 minutes were going to unfold. The crowd began to gather, sensing drama, their phones ready to capture whatever entertainment was about to begin. None of them understood they were about to witness the moment when 3 military careers ended with a single thrown bottle and the revelation of an identity that would transform everything they thought they knew about strength, rank, and respect. But first, there would be 22 more minutes of escalating stupidity before the truth emerged in a way that would leave everyone questioning their assumptions about the quiet woman in the corner booth. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rocco Martinez approached Jade's corner booth with the swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. His combat boots echoed against the wooden floor as Danny and Tyler flanked him like wingmen in a poorly planned military operation. The trio's movement drew attention from every corner of Kellerman's bar, creating an audience eager for Friday night entertainment. "Excuse me, ma'am," Rocco said with exaggerated politeness that dripped with condescension, "but I think you might be lost. The university library closed hours ago." His comment triggered a wave of snickers from nearby tables, where other Marines leaned forward to catch every word of what promised to be an amusing confrontation. Jade looked up from her paperback, a Tom Clancy novel, though none of the approaching Marines bothered to notice the irony, and met Rocco's gaze with calm blue eyes that showed no trace of intimidation. "I'm exactly where I want to be," she replied quietly, her voice carrying just enough authority to make Danny shift uncomfortably, though he couldn't quite identify why. "See, that's the problem," Tyler interjected, emboldened by the growing crowd of spectators. "This is a Marine bar. We come here to decompress from real military work, not babysit civilians who wandered in from their book clubs." His comment earned approving nods from several tables, where off-duty personnel began pulling out phones to record what they assumed would be easy entertainment. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez watched the developing situation from his position near the pool table. his 20 years of military experience creating unease about the direction things were heading. Unlike the younger Marines, Rodriguez had learned to read people beyond their surface appearance. And something about the woman's composure suggested she wasn't the easy target his colleagues assumed. Maybe we should dial this back a bit, Rodriguez suggested to his drinking companion, Sergeant First Class Angela Hayes, who'd been observing the confrontation with similar concern. Hayes nodded, recognizing the signs of a situation that could escalate beyond simple harassment into something with serious consequences. But the crowd's energy was building like pressure in a boiler. And Rocco was feeding off the attention like a performer who'd found his stage. "I'm just trying to help," he continued, his voice carrying across the bar as more patrons turned their attention to the corner booth. "Clearly, you've made a navigation error. The wine bar with the fancy cheese is probably more your speed." Jade marked her place in the book with deliberate precision, closing it with movements that demonstrated the kind of controlled calm that comes from extensive training in high-stress situations. "I appreciate your concern," she said, her tone remaining perfectly neutral despite the escalating harassment. "But I'm comfortable here." Danny stepped closer, his youth making him desperate to prove himself worthy of his sergeant's approval. "Come on, lady. We're trying to be nice about this. Don't make it harder than it needs to be." His words carried an implicit threat that made several patrons uncomfortable. Though none were willing to intervene in what appeared to be military business, the bartender, Jimmy Walsh, a former Navy petty officer who'd seen enough bar fights to recognize trouble brewing, began moving closer to the phone behind the register. His instincts told him this confrontation was heading somewhere ugly. But his experience also warned him against interfering with what appeared to be off-duty military personnel handling their own business. Corporal Lisa Chun sat at a nearby table with two other female Marines, watching the harassment with growing disgust. "This is embarrassing," she muttered to her companions. "Three grown men ganging up on one woman who's just trying to read a book." But peer pressure and military hierarchy kept her from speaking up, a decision she'd regret for months afterward. Tyler's liquid courage was reaching dangerous levels as he leaned against Jade's table, invading her personal space with obvious intention to intimidate. "You know what I think?" he announced loudly enough for the entire bar to hear. "I think some people don't understand that respect has to be earned. This isn't your safe space, princess." The crowd's attention was now completely focused on the corner booth, creating a coliseum atmosphere that encouraged escalation rather than de-escalation. Phone cameras were openly recording, social media posts were being crafted, and bets were being quietly placed on how the confrontation would resolve. What none of the spectators noticed was how Jade's positioning had subtly shifted during the conversation. Her feet were now planted firmly on the floor, her center of gravity had lowered slightly, and her hands rested casually but strategically on the table's edge. To the untrained eye, she appeared relaxed. To someone with tactical training, she looked like a coiled spring ready to release devastating force. Master Chief Petty Officer Sarah Davidson entered Kellerman's through the front door, her civilian clothes concealing 28 years of naval experience and her current assignment as senior enlisted advisor for special operations training at Fort Meridian. Her presence went unnoticed by the crowd focused on the developing confrontation. But her experienced eyes immediately assessed the situation with professional concern. "This has gone far enough," Rodriguez finally said, rising from his position near the pool table. His staff sergeant rank gave him authority over the harassers, and his experience told him the situation was approaching a point of no return. "Martinez, Kowalski, Reeves, stand down and return to your drinks." But Rocco's pride was fully engaged now, and backing down in front of an audience would damage his reputation among the junior Marines who looked up to him. "With respect, Rodriguez, we're just having a friendly conversation with our new friend here, making sure she understands the local customs." Danny, desperate to maintain momentum, reached for Jade's book. Maybe if you spent less time reading about military life and more time living in the real world, you'd understand how things work around here. His attempt to grab the novel was deflected with a movement so subtle and efficient that most observers missed it entirely. But Rodriguez caught the professional quality of the defensive technique. The crowd pressed closer, drawn by the escalating tension and the promise of drama. Someone shouted encouragement from the back of the room, while others began live-streaming the confrontation to social media platforms that would preserve every detail of what was about to become a career-ending mistake. Tyler's impatience was reaching a boiling point as the woman continued to maintain her composure, despite their sustained harassment. "You know what?" he announced, grabbing an empty beer bottle from a nearby table. "Maybe some people need a more direct lesson in respect." The bottle felt solid in his grip, the weight promising impact that would finally get a reaction from their maddeningly calm target. Around the bar, spectators leaned forward in anticipation, their phones capturing every angle of what they assumed would be harmless intimidation. Master Chief Davidson pushed through the crowd with growing urgency, her experience recognizing signs that the younger Marines were completely missing. Rodriguez moved to intercept, but the crowd's density slowed his progress. Toward the corner booth, Jade's eyes tracked the bottle in Tyler's hand with the kind of focused attention that suggested extensive training in threat assessment and response. Her breathing remained controlled, her posture unchanged, but every muscle in her body was now primed for action that would surprise everyone in Kellerman's bar. "Last chance, book lady," Tyler said, raising the bottle in what he intended as a threatening gesture. "Time to find somewhere more appropriate for your kind of people." The crowd fell silent in anticipation, phones recording, drinks forgotten as everyone waited to see how the quiet woman in the corner would respond to direct physical intimidation from 3 career Marines who had no idea they were about to discover exactly who they were threatening. In 17 more minutes, that bottle would be flying through the air, and everything would change forever. Tyler's grip tightened on the beer bottle as he waved it in what he clearly believed was an intimidating display of dominance. The amber glass caught the neon light from the Budweiser sign, creating menacing shadows across his face as he leaned closer to Jade's table. "I'm getting tired of playing games with you, lady. Maybe it's time someone taught you some manners." The crowd pressed closer, their anticipation palpable as phones continued recording what they expected would be either complete capitulation or an amusing meltdown from the seemingly helpless woman. The air grew thick with cigarette smoke and the collective breath of dozens of spectators eager for entertainment at someone else's expense. Jade closed her Tom Clancy novel with deliberate precision, placing it carefully on the table's scarred wooden surface. Her movements were economical and controlled, each gesture flowing into the next with the kind of fluid efficiency that suggested extensive training in situations requiring calm under pressure. "I understand you're having a difficult evening," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly despite the bar's ambient noise. "But threatening people with bottles isn't going to solve whatever's bothering you." Danny stepped forward, emboldened by Tyler's escalation and desperate to prove his worthiness to Sergeant Martinez. "She's got some mouth on her for someone who's about to learn a lesson," he announced loudly, playing to the crowd like an actor seeking applause. His comment drew cheers from several tables where junior enlisted personnel were enjoying the spectacle. But Master Chief Davidson had finally pushed through the crowd far enough to observe the developing situation with professional clarity. Her 28 years of naval experience had exposed her to personnel from every military specialty, and something about the woman's bearing was triggering recognition signals she couldn't quite place. The controlled breathing, the perfect posture, the way her eyes continuously tracked potential threats while maintaining Conversational eye contact, all indicators of advanced tactical training. Rodriguez continued moving toward the corner booth, his staff sergeant rank giving him authority to intervene. But the crowd's density and his own reluctance to embarrass his fellow NCO in public were slowing his response. His instincts told him the situation was approaching a dangerous threshold. But peer pressure and military protocol complicated his options for de-escalation. "You know what bothers me most about people like you?" Rocco continued, his alcohol-fueled confidence reaching dangerous levels. "You think you can just walk into our space and act like you belong. Like you understand what we've been through. What we've sacrificed." His voice carried the righteous indignation of someone who'd convinced himself that harassment was actually patriotic duty. Jade's response demonstrated the first subtle indication that appearances could be deceiving. "What makes you think I haven't served?" she asked quietly, her tone carrying just enough edge to make Danny take an unconscious step backward. The question hung in the smoky air like a challenge, creating a moment of uncertainty among the harassers, who'd been operating under the assumption that they were dealing with a civilian. Tyler laughed with the kind of forced bravado that masked underlying nervousness. "Right, you served coffee at some office job while real warriors were getting shot at overseas." His dismissive response was designed to maintain momentum. But careful observers might have noticed how Jade's shoulders had shifted, almost imperceptibly, into a more aggressive stance. The first real demonstration of unexpected capability came when a drunk corporal from a nearby table stumbled toward their confrontation, his unsteady gait carrying him directly into Jade's personal space. Without appearing to move quickly or exert significant effort, she guided his momentum away from her, positioned with a subtle hand placement that redirected his fall toward an empty chair rather than allowing him to crash into her table. The movement was so smooth and natural that most observers assumed the drunk Marine had simply caught himself. But Rodriguez caught the professional quality of the redirection technique. His 20 years of military experience had exposed him to personnel from various specialties, and what he'd just witnessed looked like advanced defensive training rather than lucky reflexes. "Smooth moves for a librarian," Danny observed with nervous laughter, his youth making him uncertain about how to interpret what he'd witnessed. The casual efficiency of Jade's defensive movement had planted seeds of doubt about their initial assessment. But alcohol and peer pressure prevented serious reconsideration of their approach. "Master." Chief Davidson positioned herself where she could observe the woman's technique more carefully, her extensive experience with special operations personnel creating growing certainty that they were witnessing someone with advanced tactical training. The redirection move had been textbook perfect, the kind of fluid defensive technique that required thousands of hours of practice to execute so naturally. Jade returned to her novel with the same calm professionalism she'd maintained throughout the confrontation. But now her positioning had subtly changed. Her feet were planted more firmly, her center of gravity was lower, and her free hand rested on the table in a position that would enable rapid response to any physical threat. To untrained observers, she appeared relaxed. To someone with tactical knowledge, she looked like a predator waiting for prey to make a fatal mistake. The crowd's energy was building toward a crescendo as Tyler continued brandishing the beer bottle with increasing aggression. "I think our friend here needs to understand that respect isn't something you read about in books," he announced, his voice carrying across the bar. "Sometimes people need practical demonstrations." Rocco seized on his subordinate's escalation, recognizing an opportunity to cement his leadership position through successful intimidation. "That's right, Tyler. Some lessons can't be learned from textbooks." His approval gave Tyler the green light he'd been seeking for more aggressive action. But Jimmy Walsh, the bartender, had been observing the woman's defensive movement with professional interest. His own Navy background had included security training that exposed him to personnel from specialized units, and what he'd witnessed looked suspiciously like advanced close-quarters defense techniques. His hand moved closer to the phone behind the register as his instincts warned him that the situation was more complex than it appeared. Corporal Chun continued watching from her nearby table with growing discomfort as the harassment escalated beyond simple verbal intimidation toward potential physical confrontation. "This is getting out of hand," she muttered to her companions. But military hierarchy and social pressure continued preventing direct intervention in what appeared to be senior NCO business. Jade's second demonstration of unexpected capability occurred when Tyler, emboldened by the crowd's attention, reached across her table to grab what he assumed was just a regular paperback novel. Instead of allowing him to take the book, she placed her hand on his wrist, with pressure that immediately froze his movement without appearing to exert significant force. "I'd prefer you didn't handle my property," she said quietly, her grip maintaining perfect control over Tyler's considerably larger hand and wrist. The technique she was using required precise knowledge of pressure points and leverage that characterized advanced defensive training rather than casual self-defense instruction. Tyler's eyes widened as he realized he couldn't move his hand despite his size and strength advantage. The grip felt like being caught in a mechanical vise that applied just enough pressure to prevent movement without causing injury. "What the hell?" he started, but couldn't complete the sentence as he struggled unsuccessfully to free himself. Rodriguez watched the restraint technique with professional fascination, recognizing the systematic precision that characterized military hand-to-hand combat training. The woman's control was perfect enough force to dominate, but not enough to cause injury or provoke escalation. It was the kind of measured response that suggested extensive experience in managing physical confrontations. "Master," Chief Davidson pushed closer to the developing situation, her recognition of the woman's capabilities creating urgency about preventing escalation that could have serious consequences for everyone involved. The first real demonstration of unexpected capability came when a drunk corporal from a nearby table stumbled toward their confrontation, his unsteady gait carrying him directly into Jade's personal space. Without appearing to move quickly or exert significant effort, she guided his momentum away from her, positioned with a subtle hand placement that redirected his fall toward an empty chair rather than allowing him to crash under her table. The movement was so smooth and natural that most observers assumed the drunk Marine had simply caught himself. But Rodriguez caught the professional quality of the redirection technique. His 20 years of military experience had exposed him to personnel from various specialties, and what he'd just witnessed looked like advanced defensive training rather than lucky reflexes. "Smooth moves for a librarian," Danny observed with nervous laughter, his youth making him uncertain about how to interpret what he'd witnessed. The casual efficiency of Jade's defensive movement had planted seeds of doubt about their initial assessment, but alcohol and peer pressure prevented serious reconsideration of their approach. "Master," Chief Davidson positioned herself where she could observe the woman's technique more carefully, her extensive experience with special operations personnel creating growing certainty that they were witnessing someone with advanced tactical training. The redirection move had been textbook perfect, the kind of fluid defensive technique that required thousands of hours of practice to execute so naturally. Jade returned to her novel with the same calm professionalism she'd maintained throughout the confrontation, but now her positioning had subtly changed. Her feet were planted more firmly, her center of gravity was lower, and her free hand rested on the table in a position that would enable rapid response to any physical threat. To untrained observers, she appeared relaxed. To someone with tactical knowledge, she looked like a predator waiting for prey to make a fatal mistake. The crowd's energy was building toward a crescendo as Tyler continued brandishing the beer bottle with increasing aggression. "I think our friend here needs to understand that respect isn't something you read about in books," he announced, his voice carrying across the bar. "Sometimes people need practical demonstrations." Rocco seized on his subordinate's escalation, recognizing an opportunity to cement his leadership position through successful intimidation. "That's right, Tyler. Some lessons can't be learned from textbooks." His approval gave Tyler the green light he'd been seeking for more aggressive action, but Jimmy Walsh, the bartender, had been observing the woman's defensive movement with professional interest. His own Navy background had included security training that exposed him to personnel from specialized units, and what he'd witnessed looked suspiciously like advanced close-quarters defense techniques. His hand moved closer to the phone behind the register as his instincts warned him that the situation was more complex than it appeared. Corporal Chun continued watching from her nearby table with growing discomfort as the harassment escalated beyond simple verbal intimidation toward potential physical confrontation. "This is getting out of hand," she muttered to her companions. But military hierarchy and social pressure continued preventing direct intervention in what appeared to be senior NCO business. Jade's second demonstration of unexpected capability occurred when Tyler, emboldened by the crowd's attention, reached across her table to grab what he assumed was just a regular paperback novel. Instead of allowing him to take the book, she placed her hand on his wrist, with pressure that immediately froze his movement without appearing to exert significant force. "I'd prefer you didn't handle my property," she said quietly, her grip maintaining perfect control over Tyler's considerably larger hand and wrist. The technique she was using required precise knowledge of pressure points and leverage that characterized advanced defensive training rather than casual self-defense instruction. Tyler's eyes widened as he realized he couldn't move his hand despite his size and strength advantage. The grip felt like being caught in a mechanical vise that applied just enough pressure to prevent movement without causing injury. "What the hell?" he started, but couldn't complete the sentence as he struggled unsuccessfully to free himself. Rodriguez watched the restraint technique with professional fascination, recognizing the his question was designed as a casual inquiry, but Walsh's Navy background had taught him to recognize when someone possessed technical knowledge that exceeded their apparent role. The radio malfunction was really a problem that had been plaguing the bar's sound system for weeks, but he was curious about whether she'd demonstrate familiarity with military communication protocols. Jade glanced toward the radio equipment behind the bar, her eyes automatically assessing the setup with the kind of systematic evaluation that suggested extensive familiarity with communication systems. "What kind of interference pattern?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly toward the professional efficiency that characterized someone accustomed to technical problem-solving. "Intermittent. Static with occasional voice breakthrough on what sounds like encrypted channels," Walsh explained, watching her reaction carefully. "Happens every few hours, lasts about 10 minutes, then clears up completely." The technical description sparked immediate recognition in Jade's expression, a subtle shift that Rodriguez caught from his position near the pool table. Her response demonstrated knowledge that went far beyond casual familiarity with radio equipment. "Sounds like frequency bleed from secure military communications," Jade said without hesitation. "Probably encrypted tactical channels operating on adjacent frequencies. The intermittent pattern suggests scheduled transmission windows rather than equipment malfunction." Her analysis was delivered with the kind of confident authority that comes from extensive experience with communication systems. But the implications of her knowledge were beginning to register among the more experienced personnel in the bar. Understanding of encrypted tactical communication protocols required security clearance and specialized training. Tyler's frustration with the technical discussion led him to escalate the confrontation in a different direction. "I don't care what kind of radio geek she is," he announced loudly. "The question is whether she belongs in a marine bar or should find somewhere more suited to her delicate sensibilities." But Master Chief Davidson stepped forward, her curiosity about the woman's technical knowledge overriding her reluctance to interfere in what appeared to be enlisted personnel business. "That's a very specific analysis of military communication protocols," she observed. "That kind of knowledge typically requires specialized training and security clearance." Jade's response demonstrated even more advanced understanding than her initial assessment had revealed. "The encryption signature and transmission timing suggest special operations communication protocols," she continued, her technical explanation revealing familiarity with classified systems. "Probably rotating frequency coordination to prevent interception and signal analysis." The level of detail in her explanation sent a chill through Rodriguez's spine as he realized they were hearing someone discuss classified communication procedures with the casual authority of someone who used such systems regularly. Her knowledge extended far beyond what civilian contractors, or even most military personnel, would possess. Danny's determination to maintain the harassment led him to challenge her technical expertise directly. "Anyone can throw around fancy technical terms," he said dismissively. "Prove you actually know what you're talking about instead of just repeating stuff you read in books." Jade's demonstration of practical technical knowledge came when she rose from her booth and approached the malfunctioning radio equipment behind the bar. Her movement was economical and purposeful, each step reflecting the controlled precision that had characterized her defensive techniques earlier. "May I?" she asked Walsh, who nodded permission for her to examine the equipment. Her inspection was systematic and professional, hands moving across controls and connections with the familiarity that comes from extensive hands-on experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Within 90 seconds, she'd identified the source of the interference and implemented a solution that involved adjusting frequency filters and signal amplification in ways that required intimate understanding of military communication systems. The static cleared immediately, replaced by crystal-clear audio that had eluded Walsh's repair attempts for weeks. The problem was harmonic interference from the adjacent military frequency range, she explained as she completed the adjustments. "Your equipment was configured to overlap with classified communication bands, creating the breakthrough you were experiencing." Rodriguez watched her technical demonstration with professional fascination, recognizing that her solution had required knowledge of classified frequency allocations and encryption protocols that were restricted to personnel with specialized security clearances. Her casual competence with military communication system suggested background that contradicted everything about her civilian appearance. Master Chief Davidson approached the repaired radio equipment with decades of experience that allowed her to appreciate the sophistication of the technical solution. "That was advanced frequency management," she observed. "The kind of expertise that requires specialized training in military communication systems." But Tyler's alcohol-impaired judgment led him to dismiss the technical demonstration as irrelevant to their original confrontation. "So she knows about radios," he said with exaggerated indifference. "Doesn't change the fact that she doesn't belong in a marine bar acting like she's one of us." Jade returned to her corner booth with the same calm professionalism she'd maintained throughout the evening. But now her technical competence had created additional questions about her actual background and qualifications. The radio repair had been too smooth, too professional, too familiar for someone whose only connection to the military was supposed to be academic interest. Corporal Chun watched the technical demonstration from her nearby table with growing awareness that their harassment target possessed capabilities that exceeded anything they'd expected. "That was an amateur hour radio repair," she murmured to her companions. "That was expert-level technical knowledge." The crowd's dynamic was shifting as word spread about the radio repair that had solved a weeks-old technical problem within minutes. Observers were beginning to question their assumptions about the woman's background, though alcohol and peer pressure prevented serious reconsideration of the harassment. Campaign. Jimmy Walsh tested her knowledge further by asking about other technical issues that had been plaguing the bar's equipment. "We've also been having problems with the security system," he mentioned. "Cameras keep losing signal, and the motion sensors are triggering false alarms." Jade's response demonstrated familiarity with security systems that extended far beyond civilian knowledge. "False alarms usually indicate calibration problems with infrared sensors," she explained without hesitation. "Environmental factors like temperature, fluctuations, and air circulation can affect sensitivity settings if the system isn't properly configured for the specific installation environment." Her analysis included technical details about security system operation that required professional training and hands-on experience with sophisticated surveillance equipment. The casual authority of her explanation suggested someone who'd worked extensively with advanced security systems rather than someone who'd learned about them academically. Rodriguez realized that every technical challenge was revealing additional evidence of the woman's advanced military background. Her knowledge extended across multiple specialized fields that required security clearances and systematic training that contradicted her civilian appearance. But Rocco's pride was preventing him from acknowledging that their harassment campaign had been based on fundamentally incorrect assumptions about their target's background and capabilities. "I don't care if she can fix every piece of equipment in this bar," he announced defiantly. "The question is respect, and she hasn't shown proper respect for the warriors who've earned the right to drink here." His insistence on continuing the harassment, despite mounting evidence of her legitimate military background, demonstrated the kind of stubborn pride that would soon lead to a career-ending mistake that would be captured on multiple phone cameras for permanent documentation. In 10 more minutes, Tyler's bottle would be flying through the air, and everyone would discover exactly how catastrophically they'd misjudged the person they'd chosen to harass. The atmosphere in Kellerman's bar had evolved from simple harassment into something more complex and dangerous. What had begun as 3 Marines targeting an apparently defenseless woman was transforming into a situation where each challenge revealed capabilities that contradicted their fundamental assumptions about their target. Rocco's frustration with the technical demonstrations was reaching a boiling point. His authority as a staff sergeant demanded respect from subordinates, but the evening's events were undermining his credibility in ways that alcohol made impossible to process rationally. The woman's casual competence with military systems was creating doubt among his audience of junior Marines. "Enough with the parlor tricks," Rocco announced, his voice carrying across the bar with forced authority. "Technical knowledge doesn't mean anything if you can't handle yourself when things get physical." His challenge represented a shift from intellectual testing toward the kind of physical intimidation that had served him well throughout his military career. Tyler seized on his sergeant's escalation with enthusiasm born of alcohol and desperation to prove himself. "That's right," he agreed loudly. "Anyone can memorize technical manuals, but real military training means being able to handle physical challenges under pressure." The crowd pressed closer, sensing that the confrontation was approaching a more dramatic phase. Phone cameras adjusted angles to capture whatever physical demonstration was about to unfold. While betting odds were quietly discussed among observers, eager for entertainment. Master Chief Davidson watched the escalation with growing concern. Her decades of experience recognizing that physical challenges could quickly escalate beyond controlled demonstration into actual violence. Her naval background had exposed her to the kind of systematic, physical training that the woman's earlier defensive techniques suggested. And she was beginning to understand that the Marines were about to make a serious mistake. Danny's youth made him eager to participate in what he perceived as a test of military credibility. "Let's see if she can handle some real physical challenges," he suggested, looking around the bar for appropriate equipment. His eyes settled on a loaded ammunition crate that had been left near the bar's back entrance by Marines who'd been conducting equipment transfers earlier in the evening. The ammunition crate weighed approximately 80 pounds and required proper lifting technique to move safely without injury. It was the kind of equipment that typically required 2 people to relocate, though experienced military personnel could handle it individually with proper training and conditioning. "Think you can move that crate?" Danny asked, pointing toward the heavy container with obvious expectation that the challenge would finally reveal limitations in the woman's capabilities. "Standard military equipment handling should be easy for someone with all that technical training you've been showing off." Rodriguez recognized that the physical challenge was escalating beyond appropriate boundaries for bar confrontation. But his reluctance to embarrass fellow NCOs in public continued preventing direct intervention. His staff sergeant rank gave him authority to stop the harassment, but military culture and peer pressure complicated his options for de-escalation. Jade regarded the ammunition crate with the same systematic assessment she'd applied to the radio equipment, her eyes evaluating weight distribution, grip points, and lifting mechanics with professional efficiency. Her analysis took exactly 3 seconds, but the systematic nature of her evaluation suggested extensive experience with heavy equipment handling. "Standard ammunition container," she observed quietly. 80-pound capacity when fully loaded. Requires proper lifting form to prevent back injury. Her technical assessment demonstrated familiarity with military equipment specifications that extended beyond casual knowledge. Tyler laughed with nervous bravado that masked growing uncertainty about their target's capabilities. "Knowing the specs and actually moving the weight are 2 different things," he pointed out. "Let's see what all that book learning is worth when things get physical." The physical demonstration began when Jade rose from her corner booth and approached the ammunition crate with movements that demonstrated the controlled precision she'd shown throughout the evening. Her assessment of the container's weight and balance was systematic and professional, hands testing grip points and load distribution with practiced efficiency. Her lifting technique was textbook perfect, knees bent, back straight, core engaged, with smooth controlled movement that demonstrated extensive training in proper equipment handling under field conditions. The 80-pound container rose smoothly in her grip, held steady for several seconds, then lowered with the same controlled precision. But what impressed Rodriguez most was not just her ability to handle the weight, but the systematic efficiency of her technique. Her lifting form showed none of the strain that civilian fitness training typically displayed, and her breathing remained controlled throughout the demonstration. It was the kind of professional competence that characterized specialized military conditioning. "Impressive," Master Chief Davidson observed, her naval experience allowing her to recognize that the lifting demonstration had revealed training that exceeded standard military physical fitness requirements. The woman's technique suggested the kind of systematic conditioning that characterized special operations preparation. However, Tyler's alcohol-impaired judgment led him to dismiss the demonstration as insufficient proof of legitimate military background. "Anyone can lift a box," he announced defiantly. Real military training means handling equipment under combat conditions, not controlled demonstrations in a bar. His escalation prompted Danny to suggest a more challenging test of physical capabilities. "Let's see her handle multiple containers simultaneously," he proposed, pointing toward additional equipment that had been staged near the bar's storage area. Real military operations don't involve moving. One box at a time. The second phase of physical testing involved multiple ammunition containers. That required coordinated movement and systematic planning to relocate efficiently. The challenge demanded not just individual strength, but strategic thinking about load management and movement coordination. Under time pressure, Jade's approach to the multi-container challenge revealed additional evidence of advanced training. Her movement was systematic and efficient, utilizing proper body mechanics and strategic positioning that minimized energy expenditure while maximizing load capacity. Each container was positioned precisely for optimal balance and accessibility, technique she employed for handling multiple loads. Simultaneously demonstrated familiarity with tactical equipment management under operational conditions. Her movements showed none of the hesitation that characterized civilian strength training, flowing instead with the practiced efficiency that comes from extensive field experience. Rodriguez watched her multi-container demonstration with professional fascination, recognizing that her load management techniques were consistent with advanced military logistics training. The systematic efficiency of her approach suggested experience with equipment handling under field conditions rather than gymnasium instruction. "That's not standard physical fitness training," Corporal Chun observed from her nearby table, her own military background allowing her to appreciate the sophistication of the techniques she was witnessing. "That's tactical equipment management, the kind of stuff they teach in advanced military schools." Master Chief Davidson approached the demonstration area, her curiosity about the woman's background overriding her reluctance to interfere in what appeared to be enlisted personnel business. "Those are specialized load management techniques," she noted, "the kind of training that requires systematic instruction in tactical operations." But Rocco's pride prevented acknowledgement that the physical demonstrations were revealing capabilities that contradicted their harassment campaign. "Strength training doesn't prove anything about combat readiness," he insisted, his voice carrying the forced authority of someone whose credibility was being systematically undermined. The third phase of physical testing came when Tyler decided to examine her hands for evidence that would contradict her demonstrated capabilities. "Let's see those hands," he demanded, reaching toward her with obvious intention to inspect for calluses or other indicators of her actual background. Jade's defensive response to Tyler's attempt to grab her hands revealed additional evidence of advanced training. Her movement was economical and precise, redirecting his reach with technique that demonstrated systematic instruction in defensive procedures. The redirection was subtle enough to avoid provoking escalation while being effective enough to maintain personal space. Tyler found his reaching motion smoothly deflected, without understanding exactly how the redirection had been accomplished. "What the hell was that?" he asked, staring at his hand as if it had betrayed him by failing to complete its intended movement. "Personal space preference," Jade replied quietly, her tone remaining calm despite Tyler's increasingly aggressive behavior. But her defensive technique had been too smooth, too professional, too systematic for someone whose only military experience was supposed to be academic study. Rodriguez caught the professional quality of her defensive movement, recognizing the systematic efficiency that characterized advanced hand-to-hand combat training. Her technique had been perfect enough control to prevent contact without enough force to provoke retaliation. The crowd began murmuring among themselves as observers processed the defensive demonstration that had neutralized Tyler's physical advance so effortlessly. Phone cameras captured the technique from multiple angles, preserving evidence of capabilities that exceeded all expectations. Master Chief Davidson positioned herself closer to the developing confrontation, her naval experience creating certainty that they were witnessing someone with advanced military training. The defensive techniques, the equipment handling, the systematic competence, all indicators pointed towards specialized background that contradicted her civilian appearance. But Tyler's frustration with his inability to assert physical dominance led him toward the dangerous escalation that would define the rest of the evening. "I'm tired of games," he announced, his voice carrying across the bar with ominous finality. "Time for some direct communication." In 6 more minutes, that beer bottle would be flying through the air, and everyone would discover exactly how catastrophically they had misjudged the quiet woman in the corner booth, whose capabilities extended far beyond anything they could have imagined. The tension in Kellerman's bar had reached a critical threshold where alcohol, wounded pride, and systematic miscalculation were converging into a situation that would have permanent consequences for everyone involved. Tyler's frustration with his inability to intimidate their target had evolved into something more dangerous than simple harassment. It was becoming a direct challenge to military hierarchy and professional competence. That Master Chief Davidson recognized that the escalating confrontation required immediate intervention before it crossed boundaries that would trigger official disciplinary action. Her 28 years of naval experience had taught her to identify moments when informal resolution became impossible and formal protocols became necessary. "Gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying the authority that came with senior enlisted rank and decades of operational experience, "I think this situation has progressed beyond casual bar interaction. We need to establish some official parameters for whatever evaluation you're attempting to conduct." Her intervention represented a shift from entertainment to formal assessment, creating structured boundaries that would protect all participants while ensuring that any demonstrations would be documented and conducted under appropriate supervision. The crowd's energy shifted accordingly, sensing that casual harassment was evolving into something more serious. Rocco seized on Master Chief Davidson's suggestion as an opportunity to legitimize their harassment campaign through official channels. "That's exactly what I was thinking," he announced with renewed confidence. "If she wants to claim military credentials, then she should be willing to prove them through proper evaluation." Tyler's alcohol-fueled aggression made him eager to escalate the confrontation into formal territory, where his size and apparent strength would provide clear advantages. "Absolutely," he agreed loudly. "Let's conduct official testing instead of playing games with technical demonstrations and fancy lifting techniques." Rodriguez approached the group with obvious reluctance, recognizing that formal evaluation would create permanent documentation of the evening's events while potentially revealing information that could embarrass everyone involved. "Are we sure that's the direction we want to take this?" he asked cautiously, but Danny's youth and inexperience made him enthusiastic about the prospect of formal testing that would provide definitive answers about their target's background. "It's the only way to settle the questions about her qualifications," he insisted. "Either she can back up her claims or she can't." Jade regarded the developing formal challenge with the same calm professionalism she'd maintained throughout the confrontation. The shift from harassment to official evaluation actually worked in her favor, providing structured protocols that would protect her while ensuring that any demonstrations would be properly witnessed and documented. "I'm willing to participate in formal evaluation," she said quietly, her tone carrying just enough authority to make several observers reconsider their assumptions about who held the advantage in this situation. Under appropriate supervision with proper safety protocols and official documentation. Jimmy Walsh, the bartender, recognized that formal military evaluation in his establishment could create liability issues that extended far beyond simple bar disturbances. If you're talking about official military testing, maybe we should consider relocating to appropriate facilities rather than conducting evaluations in a civilian establishment. Master Chief Davidson appreciated Walsh's concern while understanding that the situation had progressed beyond the point where simple relocation would resolve the underlying tensions. The evaluation can be conducted here under proper supervision, she decided, but we'll need clear parameters and appropriate documentation to ensure everyone's protection. The formal challenge began to take shape as participants negotiated terms that would satisfy both the challengers' need to prove their point and the woman's requirement for appropriate protocols. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that they were about to witness something more significant than routine bar harassment. Rocco outlined his proposed testing parameters with the confidence of someone who believed formal evaluation would vindicate his harassment campaign. Standard physical fitness assessment followed by tactical knowledge evaluation, he announced. Same standards we use for military personnel who claim advanced qualifications. Tyler added his own suggestions with enthusiasm that masked growing uncertainty about their target's capabilities. Hand-to-hand combat demonstration under controlled conditions, he proposed. Real military training means being able to handle yourself in physical confrontations. But Master Chief Davidson's experience with formal military evaluations made her insist on proper safety protocols and supervision that would protect all participants. Any physical demonstrations will be conducted under strict guidelines with appropriate medical support and official observers, she specified. Jade's acceptance of the formal testing parameters demonstrated confidence that surprised even the most experienced military personnel present. I agree to comprehensive evaluation under official protocols, she confirmed. Physical fitness assessment, technical knowledge evaluation, and tactical demonstration under appropriate supervision. Rodriguez felt the weight of realization that formal evaluation would create permanent documentation of capabilities that might contradict everything they'd assumed about their target. Once we start official testing, there's no backing out, he warned. The results become part of permanent record. The crowd's anticipation reached fever pitch as word spread that formal military evaluation was about to take place in Kellerman's bar. Phone cameras were positioned for optimal coverage. Social media posts were prepared, and spectators jockeyed for the best viewing positions. Danny's excitement about the formal challenge made him oblivious to the potential consequences of discovering that their harassment had been directed toward someone with legitimate military credentials. Finally, we're going to get some real answers instead of playing guessing games, he announced. Master Chief Davidson coordinated the establishment of formal testing protocols, ensuring that appropriate safety measures would be maintained throughout the evaluation process. Her naval experience included exposure to various military specialties, and she was beginning to understand that the results might surprise everyone involved. Testing will commence with physical fitness assessment using standard military protocols, she announced, followed by technical knowledge evaluation and tactical demonstration under controlled conditions. All activities will be documented and conducted under official supervision. Tyler's confidence in the formal testing approach was based on his assumption that structured evaluation would finally reveal limitations in their target's capabilities. This is going to be interesting, he muttered to Danny, his tone suggesting anticipation of vindication for their harassment campaign. But Jimmy Walsh's military background created growing unease about the direction events were heading. His Navy experience had taught him to recognize when situations were approaching points of no return. And formal military evaluation in a civilian establishment suggested consequences that extended far beyond simple bar disturbances. Jade's preparation for formal testing was systematic and professional, her movements demonstrating the controlled efficiency that had characterized her responses throughout the evening. She removed her sweatshirt to reveal athletic clothing that suggested someone prepared for physical activity, though the casual nature of her preparation contrasted sharply with the formal protocols being established. Crowd fell silent as participants prepared for evaluation that would provide definitive answers about capabilities that had been demonstrated only partially throughout the confrontation. The shift from harassment to formal testing represented a point of no return that would determine reputations and relationships for everyone involved. Rodriguez coordinated with Master Chief Davidson to ensure that testing protocols would be conducted according to appropriate military standards while maintaining safety requirements that would protect all participants from injury or liability. All testing will be documented with official observers and appropriate medical support, Davidson confirmed. Participants accept responsibility for results and acknowledge that evaluation will be conducted according to standard military protocols. Tyler checked his watch with growing anticipation, his alcohol-impaired judgment preventing recognition that formal testing might reveal capabilities that would transform his understanding of the evening's events. In 3 minutes, the evaluation would begin, and everyone would start discovering exactly who they had been. Challenging, but Rocco's pride and Tyler's aggression were preventing them from recognizing that their target's confident acceptance of formal testing suggested preparation and capability that exceeded their expectations. The formal challenge they had demanded was about to provide answers that would change everything they thought they knew about strength, rank, and respect. Master Chief Davidson made final preparations for evaluation that would either vindicate the harassment campaign or reveal that 3 Marines had made career-ending mistakes by challenging someone whose actual credentials exceeded their combined authority by several orders of magnitude. In 2 more minutes, formal testing would begin, and the bottle-throwing incident that would define everyone's future was approaching with the inevitability of a train wreck that no one could prevent. The formal evaluation commenced with physical fitness assessment that would establish baseline capabilities before advancing to more specialized testing. Master Chief Davidson had coordinated the setup of appropriate equipment and safety protocols, transforming one section of Kellerman's bar into an impromptu testing facility that met basic military standards. The first phase involved standard push-up evaluation under timed conditions with proper form requirements that would eliminate any possibility of inflated results through improper technique. Tyler volunteered to demonstrate proper form, his muscular frame executing 50 repetitions with mechanical precision that reflected years of military conditioning. Standard military requirement is 42 push-ups in 2 minutes for maximum score, Master Chief Davidson announced to the gathering crowd. Proper form with full range of motion, no bouncing or partial repetitions. Her establishment of testing parameters ensured that evaluation would be conducted according to recognized military standards. Jade's approach to the push-up evaluation demonstrated the systematic preparation that had characterized her responses throughout the evening. Her positioning was precise, her form textbook perfect, and her breathing controlled as she began the timed assessment with movements that flowed with mechanical efficiency. The crowd watched in silence as she executed push-ups with a rhythm that suggested extensive conditioning beyond standard military requirements. Her form remained perfect throughout the evaluation, with no degradation in technique as the repetition count climbed steadily past the maximum score threshold. Rodriguez counted repetitions with growing amazement as Jade's performance continued. Past 60, 70, 80 repetitions without any sign of fatigue or form breakdown. Her breathing remained controlled, her movement pattern maintained perfect consistency, and her pace never wavered from the steady rhythm she'd established. 97, 98, 99, 100, Rodriguez announced as the 2-minute timer expired. The crowd erupted in murmurs of disbelief as they processed a performance that exceeded elite military standards by more than double the maximum requirement. Tyler stared at the completed evaluation with expression that reflected complete shock at witnessing physical capabilities that surpassed his own performance by a significant margin. His own 50 repetitions, which had seemed impressive moments earlier, now appeared amateur in comparison to the systematic excellence he'd just witnessed. "That's not normal military fitness," Danny whispered to his companions, his voice carrying the recognition that their assumptions about physical capabilities had been as incorrect as their other judgments. "That's elite athlete-level conditioning." Master Chief Davidson documented the push-up results while preparing for the second phase of physical evaluation. Her naval experience had exposed her to personnel from various specialties, but the performance she just witnessed exceeded standard requirements for even the most physically demanding military occupations. The sit-up evaluation followed immediately, maintaining the momentum of formal testing while providing additional data about overall physical conditioning. Standard military requirements demanded maximum repetition counts within 2-minute time limits, with proper form essential for valid scoring. Jade's sit-up performance matched the excellence of her push-up demonstration, with mechanical precision that maintained perfect form throughout the evaluation period. Her core strength was evident in the controlled movement pattern that showed no degradation despite the sustained high repetition count. The final tally of 112 repetitions in 2 minutes placed her performance in the top fraction of 1% of all military personnel, a result that would be exceptional for specialized combat units and unprecedented for someone claiming civilian contractor status. Rocco watched the physical fitness demonstration with growing unease as each evaluation revealed capabilities that contradicted every assumption underlying their harassment campaign. The systematic excellence of her performance suggested training that exceeded anything in his own military experience. Pull-up evaluation using standard military protocols, Master Chief Davidson announced, directing attention to improvised equipment that would test upper body strength under conditions that eliminated assistance from lower body momentum. The evaluation would provide definitive assessment of strength capabilities. The pull-up demonstration revealed additional evidence of exceptional conditioning as Jade executed repetitions with controlled precision that maintained perfect form throughout the evaluation. Her technique was flawless, her breathing controlled, and her movement pattern demonstrated the systematic efficiency that characterized elite military conditioning. 23 perfect repetitions placed her performance above the maximum standard for even the most physically demanding military occupations. The crowd watched in stunned silence as they realized they were witnessing capabilities that exceeded those of the Marines who had been challenging her credibility. Rodriguez felt the weight of understanding that every evaluation was revealing evidence of training and conditioning that surpassed anything he'd encountered in 20 years of military service. The woman's physical capabilities suggested background in specialized units that required extraordinary fitness standards. 2-mile run evaluation using standard timing protocols, Master Chief Davidson continued, though the indoor environment would require modification of standard testing procedures. The cardiovascular assessment would complete the physical fitness evaluation while providing additional data about overall conditioning. Jimmy Walsh provided access to the bar's treadmill equipment, allowing for cardiovascular evaluation under controlled conditions that would meet basic military testing requirements. The crowd positioned themselves for optimal viewing of what had become comprehensive demonstration of exceptional capabilities. Jade's running performance maintained the same systematic excellence that had characterized her other physical demonstrations. Her pace was steady and controlled, her breathing rhythm perfect, and her form demonstrated the efficient technique that comes from extensive endurance training. The completed 2-mile evaluation in 11 minutes and 37 seconds placed her performance in the elite category for military personnel, a time that would qualify for specialized units requiring exceptional cardiovascular conditioning. The result was consistent with her other demonstrations of capabilities that exceeded standard requirements. Tyler's confidence in the formal testing approach was completely undermined by physical fitness results that revealed capabilities surpassing his own performance in every measured category. His assumption that formal evaluation would expose limitations had been catastrophically wrong. Technical knowledge evaluation covering military communication systems, weapon specifications, and tactical procedures, Master Chief Davidson announced. Transitioning to the second phase of formal testing that would assess intellectual capabilities alongside the demonstrated physical excellence. The technical evaluation began with advanced questions about military communication, protocols that required specialized knowledge and security clearance for legitimate access. Jade's responses demonstrated familiarity with encrypted systems and operational procedures that characterized elite military assignments. Her explanation of frequency coordination, encryption protocols, and communication security measures was delivered with the casual authority that comes from extensive hands-on experience rather than academic study. Each answer revealed additional evidence of background that contradicted her civilian appearance. Rodriguez listened to the technical demonstration with professional fascination, recognizing that her knowledge extended across multiple specialized fields that required years of training and operational experience to master. The systematic competence of her responses suggested elite military background. Weapons systems evaluation covering specifications, operation, and maintenance procedures, Master Chief Davidson continued, advancing to testing that would require detailed knowledge of military equipment and tactical applications. Jade's weapons knowledge demonstration exceeded even the technical expertise that Tyler's military specialty required. Her explanations of ballistic characteristics, maintenance procedures, and tactical applications were delivered with precision that suggested extensive field experience rather than classroom instruction. The crowd watched in amazement as every technical question revealed additional evidence of expertise that placed her knowledge above that of the Marines who had been questioning her. Qualifications. Her systematic competence across multiple specialties suggested training that exceeded standard military instruction. Master Chief Davidson recognized that the formal evaluation was revealing capabilities consistent with elite special operations training rather than civilian contractor background. The combination of physical excellence and technical expertise suggested assignment to units that required extraordinary qualifications. Tactical demonstration involving defensive procedures and situational assessment. Davidson announced, preparing for the final phase of evaluation that would test practical application of military training under controlled conditions. But Tyler's frustration with the systematic revelation of exceptional capabilities was reaching a dangerous threshold where alcohol and wounded pride were overriding rational assessment of the situation. His confidence in formal testing had been completely undermined by results that contradicted every assumption underlying their harassment campaign. "I don't care what kind of test scores she gets," Tyler announced with desperate defiance. Real military capability means handling unexpected situations, not performing under controlled conditions with official supervision. His rejection of formal testing results represented the final escalation that would lead to the bottle-throwing incident that would transform everyone's understanding of consequences and accountability. In 90 seconds, that beer bottle would be flying through the air. And Tyler would discover exactly why attacking a Navy SEAL commander was considered career suicide. The formal evaluation had systematically demolished every assumption underlying the harassment campaign. But Tyler's alcohol-impaired judgment was preventing him from processing the implications of what they had witnessed. His desperation to salvage some semblance of dominance from the evening's catastrophic miscalculations was driving him toward increasingly dangerous behavior. Real military training isn't about test scores and controlled demonstrations, Tyler announced loudly, his voice carrying across the bar with the kind of aggressive desperation that made experienced personnel nervous. It's about handling unexpected situations when everything goes wrong and there's no time for proper procedures. Master. Chief Davidson recognized the dangerous trajectory of Tyler's escalation and attempted to maintain control over the situation through established protocols. All evaluation activities will continue under official supervision with appropriate safety measures, she stated firmly. No unsupervised demonstrations or uncontrolled challenges. But Tyler's frustration with the systematic revelation of exceptional capabilities was overwhelming his remaining rational judgment. The bottle in his grip had become a symbol of his wounded pride, representing his last opportunity to assert some form of dominance over a situation that had completely escaped his control. Rodriguez moved closer to the developing crisis. His 20 years of military experience, recognizing the signs of impending violence that alcohol and damaged ego could produce in unstable personalities. Tyler, stand down, he commanded with staff sergeant authority. The evaluation is complete, and the results speak for themselves. However, Danny's youth and inexperience made him susceptible to following Tyler's lead rather than recognizing the dangerous direction their harassment was heading. Maybe she can handle controlled testing, he said with nervous bravado. But real situations don't come with safety protocols and official supervision. The crowd sensed the shift toward more dangerous territory. But their desire for entertainment was overriding concerns about potential consequences. Phone cameras remained focused on the developing confrontation, capturing every detail of what was about to become a documented case of assault on military personnel. Jade observed Tyler's escalating aggression with the systematic assessment that had characterized her responses throughout the evening. Her positioning had subtly adjusted to optimize defensive options while maintaining non-threatening appearance that wouldn't provoke unnecessary escalation, the crisis that would test her capabilities under actual emergency conditions came when Tyler's alcohol-fueled judgment finally overcame his remaining restraint. You want to see real military capability? He shouted, raising the beer bottle above his head with obvious intention to create the kind of unexpected situation he claimed would reveal true character. Let's see how you handle this, Commander. His use of the word commander was intended as sarcastic mockery, but the title would prove more prophetic than anyone in Kellerman's bar could have anticipated. The bottle left Tyler's hand with the full force of his alcohol-enhanced aggression, spinning end over end toward Jade's position with velocity that could cause serious injury upon impact. The emergency response that followed demonstrated capabilities that exceeded even the exceptional performance revealed during formal testing. Jade's defensive movement was so fluid and efficient that most observers initially missed the sophistication of her reaction to the potentially lethal assault. The bottle passed harmlessly through the space where her head had been milliseconds earlier, her movement having been perfectly timed to avoid impact while positioning herself for immediate counteraction if Tyler's attack continued. The evasion was accomplished with such grace that it appeared almost choreographed, though the precision required suggested thousands of hours of training in defensive procedures. Master. Chief Davidson watched the defensive demonstration with professional amazement. recognizing technique that characterized the most advanced military training available. The systematic efficiency of Jade's evasion suggested background in units that required extraordinary defensive capabilities, but the crisis was far from over. As Tyler's assault had triggered automatic response protocols that would demonstrate the full scope of capabilities that had been carefully concealed throughout the evening's harassment. The bottle's impact against the wall created the distraction that Jade needed to transition from defensive positioning to active threat neutralization. Her movement toward Tyler was executed with controlled precision that eliminated any possibility of continued aggression, while ensuring that the threat he represented would be permanently neutralized. The technique she employed was professional and systematic, designed to end confrontation definitively, without causing unnecessary injury. Tyler found himself face down on the floor, with his arms secured behind his back in a restraint hold that prevented any movement while causing no injury. The control technique was applied with textbook precision that demonstrated extensive training in apprehension procedures under combat conditions. Federal assault on military personnel. Jade announced quietly, her voice carrying across the stunned silence that had replaced the bar's previous noise. "You're under citizen's arrest pending. Arrival of military police and federal investigators." Rodriguez stared at the professional restraint technique that had been applied with such systematic efficiency that Tyler's considerably larger frame was rendered completely helpless within seconds. The systematic competence of her defensive response suggested training that exceeded anything in his military experience. The crowd watched in stunned amazement as the woman who had been quietly reading a book moments earlier demonstrated tactical capabilities that placed the evening's events in an entirely new context. Phone cameras captured every detail of the professional restraint procedure that had neutralized Tyler's assault with minimal apparent effort. Master Chief Davidson approached the restrained attacker with decades of experience that allowed her to appreciate the sophisticated technique that had been employed to end the threat. "That was textbook perfect apprehension procedure," she observed with professional admiration. "The kind of systematic training that requires specialized instruction." Jimmy Walsh contacted base security from behind the bar, his Navy background creating understanding that assault on military personnel required immediate official response. Fort Meridian Military Police. This is Kellerman's bar reporting federal assault on uniformed personnel by intoxicated Marine. Suspect is secured and awaiting transport. Jade maintained her restraint hold on Tyler with the kind of controlled precision that prevented injury while ensuring complete immobilization. Her technique demonstrated familiarity with apprehension procedures that characterized elite military training, rather than basic self-defense instruction. Danny stepped back from the confrontation with growing awareness that the evening's events had escalated far beyond simple harassment into federal crime with career-ending consequences. His youth and inexperience had prevented recognition of the danger Tyler's aggression represented until it was too late to prevent disaster. The emergency response continued as base security coordinated with local law enforcement to ensure proper processing of assault charges against military personnel. The incident would be documented and investigated according to federal protocols that would determine Tyler's military future and potential civilian prosecution. Corporal Chun finally found her voice to address the systematic failure that had enabled the assault. "This should never have gotten this far," she announced to her companions. "We all saw the escalation happening and did nothing to prevent it." Rodriguez felt the weight of responsibility for failing to intervene before Tyler's aggression reached the point of actual assault. His staff sergeant rank had given him authority to prevent the situation, but military culture and peer Pressure had complicated his options for effective. The Master Chief Davidson coordinated with arriving military police to ensure proper documentation of the assault and the professional response that had neutralized the threat. Her naval experience provided authority to oversee the incident until the appropriate investigative personnel could assume responsibility. Suspect secured with professional restraint technique, she reported to the arriving military police. No injuries to perpetrator despite violent assault on military personnel. Victim demonstrated exceptional defensive capabilities and appropriate use of force. The military police officers recognized the systematic precision of the restraint technique that had been employed to neutralize Tyler's attack. Their training and apprehension procedures allowed them to appreciate the professional competence that had prevented escalation while ensuring complete control of the situation. Tyler's consciousness returned gradually as he realized that his assault had resulted in complete tactical defeat and federal charges that would end his military career. The alcohol was beginning to clear from his system, enough for him to understand the magnitude of his mistake. "Ma'am," the senior military police officer addressed Jade. "We'll need your statement regarding the assault and your defensive response. Are you injured, and do you require medical evaluation?" Jade released her restraint hold as military police assumed custody of Tyler, her movements demonstrating the same controlled precision that had characterized her responses throughout the evening. "No injuries sustained," she reported with professional efficiency. Defensive response was proportional to threat level presented. The crisis had revealed capabilities that transformed understanding of every interaction that had occurred throughout the evening's harassment campaign. What had appeared to be bullying of a helpless civilian had actually been systematic provocation of someone whose defensive training exceeded the combined capabilities of her attackers. But the most shocking revelation was still approaching, as the arrival of investigative personnel would soon expose the true identity that Tyler's sarcastic use of commander had inadvertently predicted with devastating accuracy. The arrival of military police had transformed Kellerman's bar from a scene of harassment into an official crime scene requiring systematic documentation and investigation. Tyler's assault on what everyone had assumed was a civilian contractor had triggered federal protocols that would determine careers and potentially result in civilian prosecution for assault on military personnel. Staff Sergeant Amanda Torres, the senior military police investigator, approached the scene with 22 years of experience in handling incidents involving off-duty personnel. Her systematic assessment of the situation began with securing the area and identifying all witnesses who would need to provide official statements about the assault and its aftermath. "I need identification from all parties involved in tonight's incident," Torres announced, establishing the formal protocols that would govern the investigation. Her authority created immediate organization from what had been chaotic aftermath of Tyler's attack and subsequent neutralization. Tyler, now fully in military police custody with hands secured behind his back, was beginning to comprehend the magnitude of his mistake as the alcohol cleared from his system. The federal assault charges would end his military career and potentially result in civilian prosecution that could include significant prison time. "Ma'am," Torres addressed Jade, "I'll need to see your military identification and any relevant credentials for our incident report. The assault on military personnel requires comprehensive documentation of victim status and background." Rodriguez watched the identification process with growing unease, finally understanding that the evening's events were about to reveal information that would transform everyone's understanding of what had actually transpired during the harassment campaign. His 20 years of experience had taught him to Recognize when situations were approaching complete reversal. Jade reached into her jacket pocket with the same controlled precision that had characterized her movements throughout the evening, producing a military identification card that she presented to Staff Sergeant Torres with professional courtesy. The moment of revelation was approaching that would explain every demonstration of exceptional capability. Torres examined the identification with routine professional attention that quickly shifted to shocked recognition as she processed the information contained on the official military credentials. Her expression changed from bureaucratic efficiency to something approaching awe as she realized exactly who had been assaulted. Lieutenant Commander Jade Winters, United States Navy SEAL, Torres read aloud, her voice carrying across the stunned silence that had engulfed Kellerman's bar. Current assignment, Commanding Officer, SEAL Team 7, Naval Special Warfare Group 1. The revelation hit the gathered crowd like a physical blow, transforming their understanding of every interaction that had occurred throughout the evening. What they had witnessed wasn't harassment of a helpless civilian, it was systematic provocation of one of the most elite military officers in the entire defense establishment. Master Chief Davidson felt the weight of recognition as she realized that her growing suspicions about the woman's background had been catastrophically understated. SEAL Team 7 represented the pinnacle of naval special operations, and its commanding officer possessed credentials that exceeded those of virtually everyone present by several orders of magnitude. Rodriguez stared at the identification with complete comprehension of how spectacularly wrong their assumptions had been throughout the evening. A Navy SEAL commander represented authority and capability that surpassed his staff sergeant rank by margins that made his participation in the harassment seem almost surreal in its inappropriateness. Danny's youth and inexperience made him struggle to process the implications of discovering that their harassment target was actually a commanding officer whose authority exceeded that of everyone who had participated in or witnessed the evening's events. His face had gone pale as he realized the career implications of his participation. Rocco felt the full impact of understanding that his leadership of the harassment campaign had been directed towards someone whose rank and credentials made his staff sergeant status seem almost comically insignificant. The systematic humiliation he had attempted to inflict had actually been targeting one of the military's most elite officers. Torres continued her examination of the identification while coordinating with arriving federal investigators who would handle the assault case according to protocols designed to protect military personnel operating under various assignment conditions. Commander Winters, are you currently operating under any special assignment parameters that affect this incident? Jade's response revealed additional context that explained her presence at Kellerman's bar and her tolerance of the extended harassment campaign. Routine off-duty recreation, she replied with the professional efficiency that had characterized her responses throughout the evening. No operational considerations affecting incident documentation. The crowd began to understand that they had witnessed not just assault on military personnel, but attack on a Navy SEAL commander whose defensive capabilities had been systematically revealed through their own harassment and challenge. The irony was devastating. Their attempts to prove her inadequacy had actually demonstrated excellence that exceeded their combined capabilities. Jimmy Walsh, the bartender, felt the weight of realization that his establishment had been the scene of federal assault on one of the military's most elite officers. His Navy background created understanding of the institutional implications that would extend far beyond individual consequences for the perpetrators. Tyler's comprehension of his situation was becoming clearer as the Alcohol continued clearing from his system, and the full implications of his assault began to register. Throwing a bottle at a Navy SEAL commander constituted one of the most serious mistakes possible for a career Marine. Combining federal assault charges with attack on superior military authority, Torres coordinated with federal investigators who were arriving to handle the assault case according to protocols designed for crimes against military personnel. The systematic documentation would preserve every detail of the incident for potential civilian prosecution in addition to military disciplinary action. Commander Torres addressed Jade with the respect appropriate for her rank and position. Do you require medical evaluation? And are there any security considerations we need to address regarding your presence during this incident? Jade's response maintained the professional composure that had characterized her behavior throughout the harassment campaign. No medical attention required. Standard incident documentation is sufficient for my requirements. Her calm efficiency contrasted sharply with the shock and growing panic visible among the personnel who had participated in challenging her. Master Chief Davidson approached Lieutenant Commander Winters with the respect due to a superior officer whose credentials exceeded her own despite her decades of naval service. Ma'am, I apologize for the inappropriate treatment you received this evening. The behavior was completely unacceptable. The systematic revelation of Jade's actual identity was transforming relationships and understanding throughout Kellerman's bar as personnel processed the implications of discovering that harassment had been directed towards someone whose authority and capabilities exceeded their combined experience and training. Corporal Chen felt overwhelming shame as she realized that her failure to intervene in the harassment had enabled assault on a commanding officer whose service record represented the pinnacle of military achievement. Her silence during the escalation would require explanation in official statements. Rodriguez understood that his authority as staff sergeant had been completely inadequate to the situation from the beginning, as Lieutenant Commander Winters' rank exceeded his own by several levels of military hierarchy. His failure to prevent Tyler's escalation represented professional negligence of serious proportions. The federal investigators began systematic documentation of the assault and its aftermath, recognizing that the case involved not just criminal behavior, but attack on military personnel whose position required enhanced protection under federal law. Tyler's actions constituted multiple felonies with potential for significant prison time. Danny's growing panic reflected his understanding that participation in harassment of a Navy SEAL commander could end his military career before it had properly begun. His youth and inexperience provided no protection from the consequences of systematic provocation of superior military authority. Torres completed her preliminary investigation while coordinating with arriving command personnel who would handle the military aspects of the incident. The assault on a SEAL team commander required notification of multiple levels of authority and potential security assessment of the circumstances. Tyler was processed for transport to military detention facility while federal investigators prepared comprehensive documentation of charges that would determine his future in both military and civilian legal systems. His career was effectively over, terminated by a single moment of alcohol-fueled stupidity. The crowd began to disperse as the reality of what they had witnessed settled into their understanding. They had seen systematic harassment of one of the military's most elite officers, followed by federal assault that had been neutralized with professional precision that demonstrated exactly why attacking a Navy SEAL commander was considered career suicide. Lieutenant Commander Jade Winters remained to complete her statement and coordinate with investigators. Her professional demeanor unchanged by the revelation of her identity or the assault she had survived. The quiet woman reading a book had been revealed as one of the most dangerous and highly trained military officers in existence. The investigation into Tyler's assault had evolved into a comprehensive review of institutional failures that had enabled systematic harassment of a Navy SEAL commander. Federal investigators worked alongside military personnel to document not just the criminal behavior, but the cultural dynamics that had allowed the situation to escalate to federal assault charges. Captain Robert Sterling arrived at Kellerman's bar with the bearing of someone accustomed to handling crises involving elite military personnel. His assignment as commanding officer for Naval Special Warfare Group 1 made him directly responsible for Lieutenant Commander Winters' welfare and the institutional response to her assault. Commander Winters, Captain Sterling addressed Jade with the respect appropriate for a subordinate whose capabilities and service record commanded admiration throughout the Naval Special Operations community. "I need a complete briefing on tonight's events and any security implications related to your assignment status." Staff Sergeant Torres coordinated the expanded investigation with federal agents who specialized in crimes against military personnel. The assault on a SEAL team commander required comprehensive documentation that would support both military disciplinary action and civilian prosecution under federal statutes protecting military personnel. Tyler's processing for detention had revealed additional charges related to assault on superior military authority, transforming his situation from serious misconduct to career-ending criminal behavior with potential for significant prison time. His alcohol-fueled decision to throw the bottle had triggered cascading consequences that would affect every aspect of his future. Rodriguez found himself under official investigation for failure to prevent harassment of superior military authority despite having the rank and responsibility to intervene effectively. His 20 years of service provided no protection from accountability for enabling systematic provocation of a Navy SEAL commander. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Captain Sterling addressed him with professional displeasure. "Your failure to prevent harassment of a superior officer represents serious dereliction of duty that will be addressed through appropriate disciplinary channels." Danny's youth offered no mitigation for his participation in systematic harassment of military authority that exceeded his understanding or experience. Federal investigators documented his role in the escalation that had enabled Tyler's assault, creating permanent records that would follow him throughout any remaining military service. Master Chief Davidson provided detailed testimony about her observations of the harassment campaign and the systematic revelation of Lieutenant Commander Winters' exceptional capabilities. Her 28 years of naval experience allowed her to appreciate the sophisticated restraint that had prevented the situation from becoming far more serious. The commander's defensive response was textbook perfect, Davidson reported to the investigating team. Professional application of minimal force necessary to neutralize threat while preventing escalation or unnecessary injury to perpetrator. Rocco faced the most serious consequences among the harassment participants, as his leadership role in instigating and coordinating the systematic provocation of a superior officer constituted multiple violations of military law and federal statutes protecting military personnel from abuse. Federal investigators documented the institutional failures that had enabled harassment to continue, despite multiple opportunities for intervention by personnel with authority and responsibility to prevent such misconduct. The case would influence policy development designed to protect military personnel operating under various assignment conditions. Captain Sterling addressed the broader implications of the incident during his briefing with Lieutenant Commander Winters. "The harassment you endured represents institutional problems that extend beyond individual misconduct to systematic cultural issues requiring comprehensive response." Jimmy Walsh provided detailed testimony about his observations of the evening's events. His Navy background enabling him to recognize the professional competence that had been systematically demonstrated throughout the harassment campaign. His establishment's role in hosting the incident required cooperation with federal investigation. The federal assault charges against Tyler were supplemented by additional counts related to his systematic harassment campaign and the involvement of multiple participants in provoking the attack. The conspiracy aspects of the case would be investigated to determine the full scope of criminal behavior. Lieutenant Commander Winters maintained her professional composure throughout the expanded investigation, providing comprehensive testimony about the harassment campaign while emphasizing institutional learning opportunities rather than individual punishment priorities. The incident provides valuable data about cultural dynamics and intervention protocols. She reported to Captain Sterling. Institutional changes will be more valuable than individual consequences in preventing similar situations. Torres coordinated with military investigators who would handle disciplinary proceedings against the Marines involved in harassment of superior military authority. The systematic nature of their misconduct required comprehensive response through both criminal justice and military disciplinary systems. Danny's statement revealed the peer pressure and cultural dynamics that had enabled his participation in harassment, despite multiple opportunities to recognize the inappropriate nature of their behavior. His youth and inexperience would be considered during disciplinary proceedings, but wouldn't eliminate consequences for his choices. Rodriguez's failure to intervene effectively despite his authority and responsibility represented the kind of leadership failure that would require comprehensive review of his fitness for continued military service. 20 years of experience provided no excuse for enabling harassment of superior authority. Federal investigators interviewed witnesses throughout Kellerman's bar to document the systematic nature of the harassment campaign and the multiple opportunities for intervention that had been ignored or avoided by personnel with authority to prevent Tyler's assault. Captain Sterling addressed the command implications of the incident during his coordination with higher authority personnel responsible for Naval Special Operations security. The harassment of a SEAL team commander requires systematic review of protection protocols for personnel operating under various assignment conditions. Master Chief Davidson's testimony provided crucial perspective on FARDI, the systematic competence that Lieutenant Commander Winters had demonstrated throughout the harassment campaign, enabling investigators to understand how her professional restraint had prevented the situation from becoming far more serious. The institutional review expanded beyond individual accountability to examine the cultural factors that had enabled systematic harassment of elite military personnel. Policy changes would be implemented to prevent similar incidents while ensuring appropriate protection for personnel operating under specialized assignment conditions. Corporal Chen's failure to intervene despite recognizing the inappropriate nature of the harassment represented the kind of moral failure that would require counseling and additional training to prevent future incidents. Her silence during the escalation had enabled Tyler's assault through inaction. Tyler's transport to military detention facility marked the beginning of legal proceedings that would determine his future in both military and civilian justice systems. The federal assault charges carried potential for significant prison time in addition to military discharge and loss of benefits. Lieutenant Commander Winters completed her official statement while coordinating with command personnel about any adjustments to her assignment status that might be necessary following the public revelation of her identity and position. Her professional handling of the assault would become part of her service record. The investigation revealed institutional problems that extended throughout the military culture at Fort Meridian, requiring comprehensive response that would address not just individual misconduct, but systematic cultural issues that had enabled harassment of superior military authority. Federal prosecutors reviewed the case documentation to determine appropriate charges and prosecution strategy for Tyler's assault on military personnel. The systematic nature of the harassment campaign would influence sentencing recommendations and plea negotiations. Captain Sterling addressed the media implications of the incident as news of assault on a Navy SEAL commander began spreading through military and civilian channels. The case would require careful handling to protect operational security while ensuring appropriate public accountability. The systematic accountability process would continue for months as federal prosecution, military disciplinary proceedings, and institutional policy changes address the multiple failures that had enabled harassment and assault of one of the military's most elite officers. The incident would influence training and cultural development throughout the defense establishment. Rodriguez, Danny, and Rocco faced career-ending consequences for their roles in systematic harassment of superior military authority, while Tyler confronted federal prosecution that would determine his future freedom as well as his military status. 6 months after the incident at Kellerman's bar, The reverberations of Tyler's assault on Lieutenant Commander Jade Winters continued to reshape military culture and policy throughout Fort Meridian and beyond. The case had become a landmark example of how assumptions about rank, gender, and capability could lead to catastrophic consequences when combined with alcohol and institutional failures. Tyler Reeves had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by dishonorable discharge from the Marine Corps. His assault conviction carried permanent consequences that would affect employment prospects and civil rights for the remainder of his life. The moment he threw that bottle had transformed him from a career Marine into a federal felon whose future opportunities were permanently diminished. The federal courtroom had been packed during his sentencing hearing, where Lieutenant Commander Winters had provided victim impact testimony that focused on institutional learning rather than individual punishment. Her professional composure throughout the legal proceedings had impressed prosecutors, defense attorneys, and federal judges who recognized her systematic approach to transforming personal trauma into organizational improvement. Danny Kowalski received a general discharge under other than honorable conditions, ending his military career before it had properly begun. His youth had provided some mitigation during proceedings, but participation in harassment of superior military authority carried consequences that would follow him throughout civilian life. The 21-year-old who had sought approval from his sergeant had learned that poor judgment in selecting role models could destroy futures. His transition to civilian life proved challenging, as potential employers conducted background checks that revealed his discharge circumstances. The skills he had begun developing in the Marines were overshadowed by documentation of his participation in systematic harassment of elite military personnel. His family's disappointment was compounded by their understanding that his choices had wasted opportunities they had sacrificed to provide. Staff Sergeant Rocco Martinez faced court-martial proceedings that resulted in reduction in rank to corporal, forfeiture of 6 months' pay, and transfer to duties that eliminated his supervisory responsibilities. His role in initiating and leading the harassment campaign had been documented through witness testimony and social media posts that preserved permanent evidence of his misconduct. The career trajectory he had built over 8 years of military service was permanently altered by a single evening's poor judgment. His expertise in combat operations remained valuable, but his leadership authority was permanently compromised by evidence of his willingness to abuse junior personnel while systematically harassing superior authority. Rodriguez's failure to intervene effectively despite his rank and responsibility resulted in formal reprimand and mandatory counseling designed to address leadership failures that had enabled the escalation. His 20 years of military service provided context for disciplinary action that focused on remediation rather than termination. But his promotion potential was permanently affected. The leadership training he received as part of his corrective action included extensive education about intervention responsibilities and recognition of harassment patterns. His experience became part of case studies used throughout the military system to illustrate the consequences of failing to exercise appropriate authority when witnessing misconduct. Master Chief Davidson's professional handling of the crisis had enhanced her reputation throughout the naval system, leading to assignment as senior instructor for a new training program designed to prevent harassment of military personnel. Her 28 years of experience provided credibility for curriculum development that addressed cultural issues revealed through the investigation. The training program she developed became mandatory throughout the defense establishment, reaching thousands of military personnel with lessons learned from the Kellerman's bar incident. Her systematic approach to institutional change transformed individual trauma into organizational learning that would protect future personnel from similar harassment. Captain Sterling's response to the incident had been recognized by higher authority as exemplary crisis management that balanced accountability with institutional learning. His coordination of the investigation and policy development had influenced procedures throughout naval special operations for protecting elite personnel operating under various assignment conditions. The policy changes implemented following the investigation included enhanced training for recognition of harassment patterns, mandatory intervention protocols for personnel witnessing misconduct, and improved protection procedures for military personnel operating under specialized assignment conditions. Lieutenant Commander Winters had been promoted to commander 6 months ahead of normal schedule in recognition of her professional handling of the assault and her contribution to institutional policy development. Her systematic approach to transforming personal trauma into organizational improvement had impressed senior leadership throughout the Naval Special Operations community. Her new assignment as Director of Elite Personnel Protection Protocols provided opportunity to influence policy development throughout the defense establishment. The training programs she developed incorporated lessons learned from her own experience while addressing broader cultural issues that enabled harassment of military personnel. The impact of her work extended beyond military applications to civilian law enforcement and corporate security programs that adapted her systematic approach to harassment prevention and intervention protocols. Her expertise had created value that extended far beyond the Naval Special Operations community. Jimmy Walsh had testified during federal proceedings about his observations of the systematic harassment campaign, his Navy background providing credibility for testimony about the professional competence that Lieutenant Commander Winters had demonstrated throughout the confrontation. His cooperation with investigators had been essential for comprehensive documentation of the incident. His establishment had been recognized by military leadership for cooperation with the investigation and implementation of enhanced policies designed to prevent similar incidents. Kellerman's Bar became a case study location for training programs that addressed off-duty conduct and intervention responsibilities. The federal investigation had revealed institutional problems that extended throughout military culture, leading to comprehensive policy changes that addressed not just individual misconduct, but systematic cultural issues that enabled harassment of superior military authority. Training programs were implemented at every level of the defense establishment. Congressional hearings on the incident had led to legislation strengthening protection for military personnel against harassment and assault, with enhanced penalties for crimes targeting military authority and specialized protection protocols for elite personnel operating under classified assignment conditions. The case had influenced civilian law enforcement training programs that incorporated military lessons learned about harassment prevention and intervention protocols. Police departments throughout the country adopted systematic approaches to recognizing and preventing harassment that had been developed through analysis of the incident. Corporate security programs adapted the training methodologies that had emerged from the investigation, recognizing that harassment prevention and intervention principles developed for military applications had broader relevance for civilian workplace protection and cultural development. Educational institutions incorporated case study materials from the incident into curricula, addressing leadership, ethics, and intervention responsibilities. The systematic failure that had enabled Tyler's assault provided teaching opportunities that would influence future leaders across multiple sectors. Corporal Chen had completed enhanced training in intervention responsibilities and moral courage that addressed her failure to prevent harassment despite recognizing its inappropriate nature. Her civilian career following military service included advocacy work for harassment prevention in workplace environments. The documentation of the incident through phone recordings and social media posts had created permanent evidence that continued to influence training and policy development years after the assault. The systematic nature of the harassment campaign provided clear examples of escalation patterns that could be recognized and prevented. Lieutenant Commander Winters' victim impact statement during Tyler's sentencing had become required reading for military personnel at all levels, providing perspective on the long-term consequences of harassment and the importance of institutional culture in preventing misconduct. The incident had demonstrated that assumptions about capability and authority could lead to catastrophic consequences when combined with alcohol, peer pressure, and institutional failures. The lesson that throwing a bottle at a Navy SEAL commander constituted career suicide had become part of military folklore that influenced behavior throughout the defense establishment. 3 years later, The policies and training programs that emerged from the investigation continued to protect military personnel from harassment while ensuring that elite operators could serve effectively without compromising their safety or operational security. The systematic changes had created lasting institutional improvements that extended far beyond the individuals directly involved. Commander Jade Winters' professional handling of personal trauma had transformed a single evening's harassment into comprehensive institutional learning that would protect countless future personnel from similar experiences. Her legacy extended beyond individual achievement to systematic cultural improvement that would influence military service for generations. The quiet woman reading a book in the corner booth had become a symbol of hidden strength and professional competence, while Tyler's bottle throw had become a cautionary tale about the consequences of assumptions, harassment, and assault on military personnel. The incident would be remembered as the night when careers ended and institutions learned the true cost of disrespecting those who serve with distinction. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.